Already behind. It's all right.
Who are we missing? We are missing Kelly.
No, Rob's to go.
There goes Rob.
I'll give him a minute. It's fine. The council meeting's not terribly long.
No, I wouldn't think so at least. Not much
Yeah.
It's kind of the theme this year. It's been an unusual year in that way. Yeah, I know. Too busy working on stuff to bring this stuff forward.
Well, money's a little tight, so all the development stuff is kind of like.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting for August 14th to order and call the roll, please.
Alderman Strelchak? Alderman Teleko? Alderman Meyer? Alderman Hampshire? Alderman Bach?
Here.
Alderman Parrish? Alderman Pratt? Alderman Gephardt? And Mayor Nervin.
Here. First up, we have approval of the meeting minutes from May 2nd and July 9th. Motion and a second. Any comments, questions, corrections? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. Next up, we've got 4 discussion items, and there's some suggested time brackets we're going to try to adhere to, and for to get through this all in an hour. Well, now in an hour and 20 minutes. First of those being the discussion regarding regulation of structures located along the Lake Michigan Bluff. So I will officially call Alderman Bach's bluff and start the discussion.
Kind of a rope rail, and we had to go down, all the way on that bluff. And I'm sure those are gone today because the bluffs moved. But it was nice to be able to get down to the lake. So that's kind of what Kim is going to take us through today, because I've had 2 residents and maybe one in Alderman Gebhardt's that I heard of but I never talked to. This issue really affects maybe 2 alderman or 3 aldermanic districts. We think maybe a little bit of Alderman Strelchak's, I don't know, but at least mine and Alderman Gebhardt's. And so, the issue is that a staircase, and this is a summary, but a staircase is considered a structure under the current code, and the setbacks apply. And so one of the residents who I talked to, went all the way to the Board of Appeals and to change that so that he could put one of these in his yard to access his lake property. And that was denied, and rightfully so, because we're following the code. So the way the code is written, of course it's going to be denied, and I get that. So there's confusion, I guess, around the structure definition in this case. Some might say, I mean, I think it was in your packet that this code originally was put together maybe 1974 and then relooked at in 1988. And since that time, this technology has changed. And so you have kind of this floating staircase structure like the one at Vermont Park. They are allowed in many other lakeshore communities. Some, I think Port Washington, Grafton, at least that I know, Whitefish Bay, Two Rivers, Two Creeks, Manitowoc. They've been around for about 15 years. I think they require some maintenance. You have to tighten the cables every once in a while, but they do not do, as my understanding is, any damage to the bluff. And now that that one is at Vermont Park, certainly some of the neighbors in there also are interested. I think a small amount are interested, but they would like to access their lakeshore, which they can't right now. You know, Kim was going to take us through talk about the bluff issues. I know that it was interesting to see those green lines and the red lines and the yellow lines, and I know over the last 10 or 15, maybe 30 years along Whitefish Bay and Shorewood, I remember tons and tons of trucks coming in and showing up the bluff with concrete. So some bluffs seem to be more stable than others, but Kim, you know a lot more about this, so I'm going to pass the baton to you. And my goal is hopefully, you know, I don't think we can there's a decision on here to rewrite the code to allow these structures, but, you know, my hope is that there would be enough interest in allowing us to explore this further and giving the city some direction to say, hey, you know, look at it further, get some questions answered, so that, you know, we can address some of these neighbor concerns. So thanks for allowing me to do a quick introduction.
Thank you, Alderman Bach. Take it away, staff.
That they're saying, so every 2 feet that you go up, you need to go a foot back. Built on the bluff, and then 3, what are some of our neighboring communities doing in regards to allowing structures on the bluff. So we'll start with the known conditions. I'm sure y'all saw this picture in the memo. Unfortunately, what we have in Mequon is probably the most unstable bluff in the entire state. You can see the green there, mostly stable. We don't see a whole lot of that there. There is a portion there right on Highland. I think we all know that is Concordia, where they did that revetment wall a number of years ago. But the rest of it, you can see considerably unstable, moderately unstable, unstable, failing. So a pretty good picture to tell you what we're seeing on our bluff. Then we looked at the building code. which is kind of my area of expertise. Really, we have two building codes that we operate under, and code, which is SPS 321, that pertains to all residential 1 and 2 family dwellings. We're not really talking about putting houses on the bluff, so really the only thing in the 321 code that we would that would fall under this jurisdiction would be possibly building a freestanding deck. So that is the only thing that the SPS 321 would cover. The other code we have is the International Building Code, which applies to commercial buildings or family residential house. And then the problem with the International Building Code is part of Whitefish Bay and Fox Point. We did look into that. As you can see, the bluff in these cities is pretty stable. Not a lot that's unstable there, and I don't know why that is. I mean, it's beyond. Right, and all of this information that we have on these, where all these green and red and yellow lines come from, was a study done, a very comprehensive study done, where they kind of looked at the bluff over the last 59 years, and the way they did that is they have photographs of the bluff from 1959, and then they've taken photographs, years since then, all the way up through 2015, and then they kind of digitally put those photographs into a computer model, and then calculated, what's going on with the bluff, and that's where they came up with these classifications. So very interesting study. There are some great pictures. I mean, you can go into this. I believe the website was in the memo. You can go on that website. It's an interactive viewer where you can actually look at the pictures that they used and see everything. In fact, there's some pictures that we took off of that we'll see a little later. All right. So then we kind of looked at the legal side of it. What would the city be liable for? How do I, as an inspector, treat something like this? And then what do we do if there's some non-permitted structures? Basically, what it comes down to is there's any liability from the city would be based on anything that we permit and inspect and allow to be built there. And as far as the inspections, if we don't adopt a code to use for these structures, there's not much I can do to inspect these things. And then as far as non-permitted structures, if we do, the city's policy is if we know of structures that have been built without permit, then we would, look into getting those removed. And then we're down to two options. We can either leave it as is, the current ordinance as it is, and continue to not allow structures on the bluff, or we can make an amendment to the ordinance. So, in summary, the bluff in Mequon's not in real good shape. Any changes that we make to the current zoning and building code is going to require further analysis, because we need to come up with, some way of permitting these and having some sort of regulation. It went in the memo. We went into a little bit about what some of the other communities do. We talked about Fox Point and Whitefish Bay, and the reason I brought those up is because they were the only ones that I could really find where they specifically dealt with an ordinance to building on the bluff. I looked into Port Washington. They do not have any ordinance or regulation. So it was a little difficult to find out what the other communities are doing because they're not addressing it in their ordinance the way Fox Point and Whitefish Bay did, and they kind of relied heavily on putting the onus on private engineering to make sure that whatever they did was going to be safe. So, and I'm sure there will be absolutely no questions on that because it was crystal clear.
To be clear, the Vermont Park one is on an unstable bluff. It's pretty unstable over there according to that diagram, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so I think this new technology allows for that because you can kind of tighten them, and it requires maintenance. But that was interesting that the county put that in our own city, and that's a whole other issue. But anyway,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Piggyback off what you said. So how does the county make sure that staircase is safe? Do they? I don't know if you know the answer or not. How do they know that it's safe year after year that it's being used?
That's a great question, and I cannot answer that.
Because if it's built on an unstable bluff, and they constructed it, I would imagine that they would have to have some kind of safety inspection every year to making sure that people are not, a possibility of being injured or, falling or whatever.
At this point, we didn't permit it, and I'm not even sure if they permitted themselves. Like seeing the staff report that the county themselves has a ordinance similar to ours.
But
My question is, did the county grant themselves a permit or a waiver to their own rule?
My other question.
They've claimed sovereignty to our regulations, but we have they would be claiming an exemption from our zoning code. We have no building codes that apply to this type of structure, so there was no permitting or inspection of it. We have been out to the property and we have identified some items that if the building code were to pertain to that structure, that we would recommend they modify or correct.
Because if somebody were to get injured, who's liable? The county then?
Well, we talk about the liability issue in the staff report. Essentially, they can declare that they are not liable as the property owner because of the recreational and the terms.
If there's a problem with the staircase, they still can claim that?
Well, maybe City Attorney Sadak can address those more detailed questions, but there is the recreational immunity that applies to any property owner. The city isn't a property owner of any Lake Michigan bluff, so that really isn't a liability issue for us. Our liability issue comes in where we inspect the structure or the use, and we're declaring at that time of the inspection that the structure is in compliance at that time. Once we leave, since there is no follow-up, there's no re-inspection, there's no annual inspection. Once we leave the site, the conditions of that structure are unknown to us, but we wouldn't be liable for that.
Yeah, in short, I'll give you the most lawyer answer of all lawyer answers, which is it depends. Certainly we would anticipate that they would argue recreational immunity for anything, which would include if the stairway was not maintained appropriately, arguing that it is a recreational activity to get down to the beach and walk in the water and do whatever you want to do down on the beach. We don't have any idea if that would actually apply to this or not. I don't think the county has any idea either. They'd have to make that argument and see what happens. Certainly, they have liability just as we do for lots of things, including the design of structures and that kind of stuff. That potentially gives them some immunity as well. That immunity only applies so far as to the extent that they are not aware of a particularly dangerous hazard. Certainly some of the things that staff have pointed to with the county, could be fairly significant risks that they face. If they choose not to address those risks, that may create liability for them where they don't see that they have liability currently. It's all going to depend on the circumstances and what's there, but they ultimately will try to push off any liability based on some level of immunity that they have, whether it's recreational, governmental, etc., to try to avoid that liability.
But from a homeowner's point of view, correct me if I'm wrong, I saw in your report, which was intriguing, you could put together something in the code where that the city would not have any liability particularly with the homeowner. Is that correct? I mean, is that possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly we would, look to put provisions in that tried to minimize the liability to the city as it related to that particular property owner. The real risk that we have, and I think that there's valid and good arguments against it that certainly we would make if we got into that position, is what happens if the staircase that's otherwise permitted causes damage to the bluff that then creates issues to the neighboring property owner. That's a different situation. There may be some liability that's associated with it, just like when we approve, a subdivision that doesn't have appropriate stormwater management. There's lots of case law that says, nope, you're good, you don't have any liability there, but then every once in a while you get the case that says, there's one small facet of this that creates some liability for you, and, you lose. And so it is a risk. Obviously, we would look to, if the council's wanting to allow these types of structures, to craft it in a way to try to minimize those risks, based on looking at some of those, kind of similar circumstances. But it's not without any risk at all.
Yeah, I mean, the homeowner would have to follow DNR and NOAA regulations. I mean, right on top of the Ozaki Vermont Park one, it has all the, NOAA, DNR approved. So, they'd have to, if there were those kind of rules or laws, the homeowner would have to meet all those requirements as well, I would think.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that is I'm not sure that there really are rules. I think that sign is really more of a recognition that they're trying to tie it into the access to the waters of the state and the public, and that's what they're trying to do. That will help them, potentially a little bit in their argument of sovereignty as it relates to our regulations. But there really isn't a lot of regulation for these types of structures, even with the DNR and the feds. So.
And there's a little learning curve. Sorry, there'd be a little learning curve. We'd have to get some more facts. I mean, I think there's a lot to learn about these particular floating structures, and everything that I've learned and read. They're not going to, do anything to the bluff. And if anything, they're, going to help the bluff. So we'd have to do much more investigating and get some questions answered, and to move forward. So there's some education piece. Okay, I'll stop.
That's all right. This is why we do committee of the whole. It's a little more free form. So. There was one particular concept, I read in the report that I like if we were to consider this, and we'll get to a straw poll vote in the second if we want to keep going down this road and have staff investigate this further. But I like the idea of these things all being done by professional engineers, and then basically we just have to certify they're built to the plans from the engineer, and that would help. Well, help our inspections division not have to become experts on a brand new thing for which there are no well-established state or international codes. But it also pushes a little bit of that liability off to the person who carries the PE stamp that stamps those drawings, and not us, because this is, and I think we're maybe jumping the gun to presume that every structure that may follow would be a floating structure like the one at Vermont Park. There's probably other ideas and other things that smart engineers will try to do if they're allowed to. This is probably just one solution. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Bach, for bringing forward this topic. It's come up before. Historically, I've walked the bluff. It's concerning. The red in that map is extremely helpful to conceptualize the scope of the problem. So it's really not about how do we get people to get stairs on their bluff. I think the importance of this conversation tonight was bringing awareness to the public about, you know, when you can compare the communities, like that was a stunning, if that's true, we're the worst bluff on all of Lake Michigan. As policymakers, I hope this conversation doesn't end. I could see, you know, how do we, revetment, I think is the word, revetment, something like that, where you bring in lots of concrete and construction blocks by barge. You can't even get them down there. And that's, I guess, one of the main solutions for this problem. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for, from what I heard, even like 50 to 100 linear feet of shoreline. So I guess I'm really curious, how did the North Shore get to all green? Was that a bunch of grants they got? Did they do a long-term restoration program with homeowners to educate them and help them assess their bluff and hook them up with resources? But I could see, you know, to the point of the conversation, that if someone's, no one has water access. It's kind of ironic that we have no beach in Mequon and we have so much shoreline, but if someone has a green bluff and they've spent the money to do revetment, maybe they should have the right, they should be able to get a stairway down, I guess would be my thought on it. And that would be a way to encourage homeowners to incur that cost, and protect their neighbors as well, you know, to get to green. Thank you.
Alderman Meyer.
I guess if we go down this path, I think we have to also take a look at other type of systems to get down to the lake. And what I mean is that, and I think if I remember correctly, a long time ago there was one along the Lake Drive area that had it was either a cable system or a rail system that went down to the lake, and take a look at that type of system also for it. Not just a stairway beside it, because some people may decide to do that, like a cable car system, to head down over there, instead of doing the regular staircase type. So encompass all the types that would be available to do that.
Alderman Strelchak.
Growing up in Mequon, I've seen the lake level come up and go down, and you know, we got a ton of beach, and everyone really gets to go down and just kind of walk around at times, and then other times it's the lake's pretty much lapping against the bluff, you know, compromising the bluff integrity along with the rains of that season. So I'm game for entertaining this. I think it's a great asset to the residents that could want to put this in, as long as we can do so A, safely, B, reasonably, and then, you know, the item C that I want to bring up is I've seen some things that people have tried and they've failed, and they've sat on that side of that bluff for months, if not years. So along with any approval, you know, there would be a remediation plan if it failed. So, you know, we're known to have an unstable bluff, you know, amongst the worst in the state. I think Racine Kenosha is the only other area that was worse when they lost a few houses to the lake with the last, you know, real high levels. But as we have failures, what we don't want to end up in is a cleanup discussion and finding people and back and forth in a legal battle. We want something easy and swift. If we can't achieve something, you know, along those lines that maybe isn't overly burdensome, you know, they shouldn't have to put $100,000 in an escrow account, you know, for this, but, you know, something that would be reasonable to assure that not only what they're putting up meets the standards of safety and integrity for them and their neighbors, but also that remediation capability if something, you know, would go wrong with it. So again, just a point to address and really kind of identify what that is or what that means, or if we're just going to leave that to, you know, a discussion point of, you know, do we want to just deal with that when we get to it? But I just don't want to be irresponsible when it comes to that. Comment on the Vermont park structure. If there's things that you've identified from a safety standpoint and who's liable and who's not. If we haven't sent an email to the county identifying those items that we view that are potentially unsafe, I think that we should get that on record for the safety of our residents and our community. if they're going to claim sovereignty and be able to build it, which we appreciate it being there. It's a really nice asset to the community. We want to also make sure that stays safe, and it's something that our residents aren't going to be at risk for using, because it's very intriguing being there.
Go ahead, Alderman Meyer.
Just a short little thing, just in maybe inside or someplace, but just having a requirement that, I don't know what the time frame would be, but 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, that homeowner would have to have an engineer come back and take a look again at the stability of the staircase or whatever they put in. That would be one of the requirements in the ordinance for it.
It's an excellent idea. It hits on a point I was going to bring up. I think the discussion's good. Let me just take a temperature of the group real quick. How many people are interested in staff putting forth a little more calories on finding something we can do to make this possible versus status quo? So moving forward, hands up, status quo. There's almost no one putting their hands up for status quo. Might I make a suggestion? We can talk about my suggestion. You can poke holes in it. I think the comment about if something happens to the structure, having a provision in whatever we come up with that it has to be cleaned up within X amount of time, we can figure out what the right time is. Because certainly we don't want to be contributing to litter on the bluff or things that become navigation hazards in Lake Michigan. Certainly seen enough of that over the years. People dump their trash on the bluff. But if we do something, make it generic, because we can't possibly conceive of every idea that every engineer will come up with. Like the cable system, that's a great idea. The floating thing, that's probably also a good idea, although we don't really know how well it's going to work at Vermont yet. It's only been in for a year or two. Well, since it was completed anyway. It took longer to build than it's been operational. And I really think it's crafting this so it doesn't fall on us having to be the experts on these, and people with professional engineer stamps who can sign off on these can bear the brunt of the responsibility. And then I also like the idea, much like we do pond recertifications for subdivision ponds, having these structures be periodically inspected would be wise. My biggest concern with all of this is simply public safety. If someone wants to build a $100,000 staircase and it slides into the lake in 5 years, as long as they clean it up, I don't have too many concerns. It's not the city's money. It's not my money. If private people want to spend their money that way, God bless them. But if there's an issue that anyone has while they're down there, I want to make sure that our fire department that we share with Thiensville can get down there and respond to it and not be challenged with a whole host of navigational hazards. So there might be some component of that to work into it as well. That's another area where we'll have to send our guys into harm's way. I know we have bluff rescue experts and they train on that, but that's for the corner cases. If we start getting more staircases, there'll be more people on the bluff. There'll be more problems we need to respond to, and then even that'll get kind of taxing at times. So I'm trying to, I said all that to try and make the scope of staff's work, if they put more effort into this, which it sounds like we're in general agreement with, to kind of make it, put some protections in there, but don't give them a whole bunch of work to go off and become experts on. And I think we can do that in a way that, relying on the expertise of others, and don't specify it has to be this or that. Maybe there's another thing we can do. I'm making up policy on the fly, and that's never a good thing. We're just giving direction, but try to keep your level of effort to a minimum while getting the results we want without increasing liability or having a whole bunch of negative consequence on a public safety side. So any thoughts on that? Does that sound good? We'll probably have to come back and have a couple more meetings someday on this. So this is by far not going to be the last swing at the piñata. That generally sound good? Or are there any final comments? We've got a couple minutes left on this topic before we move on to the next one so we roughly stick to the timeline we're shooting for? Sound good? All right, silence is consent. Is that enough direction to get going? Oh, okay, perfect. Any last words on that topic? If not, we'll move on to presentation of Phase 2 report for the real estate market analysis for the Port Washington Road corridor between County Line Road and Glen Oaks Lane. Good evening.
We'll kind of summarize what we've done to date. We shared with you the full report so far. So you have the first phase and the second phase in your packet. That included existing conditions, a competitive analysis of competing shopping districts, national trends in commercial development. We looked at internal documents. We shared with you stakeholder engagement. Now we're looking at change in property value analysis, business mix by square foot number and value, vacancy rates, lease rates, and other data that is included. I wanted to, we talked a little bit about housing in our phase 1, but I wanted to share more of the comprehensive analysis we did on the senior living situation in Mequon. You have a number of senior living entities that provide care, from anything from independent living to full skilled nursing, and then specialty care like memory care, rehab, or short-term stays. There are 2 of these on Port Washington Road, Newcastle Place, and Lumia. We wanted to line them all up and just look at what the offerings are, because we do know that by 2028 there will be a significant number of seniors now, people over age 75. But that number grows to 3,200 members of your community. So it does increase significantly, and we want to make sure that we're not overlooking an opportunity to provide other options for living if that can be facilitated on Port Washington Road. We also did a little bit deeper dive on our competitive analysis and looked at the vacancy rate in the areas that we compared, along with an average rent per square foot of, basically this is of space that's available. We don't know how much existing tenants are paying, but for example, the 2 spaces that are listed for in the town center area are both listed at $18 a square foot. So, and we don't have rent numbers for Grafton Commons. But on Port Washington Road, we broke it down with office and retail, because that information was available to us. Your retail vacancy rate is very low. Office rate is about 6.5%. We looked at national development trends, and just so we knew what was happening on the national stage compared to what we know is going on in Mequon. Retail nationally, rent growth is strong, so that lease rate. There's minimal new construction, and the future of retail nationally includes digitization, customization, and efficiency. These are just some national trends of retail that are occurring that are identified in 2023. As far as malls are concerned, a lot of malls are repurposing their space to add other uses, and their office uses include government, healthcare, data centers, education. They might be diversifying their space with multifamily residential or culture and entertainment options. I think that Bayshore has a lot of those options already in place, but that's what's happening with malls. And then commercial corridors, really, there was a lot of information on how commercial corridors are achieving vitality and remaining dynamic or becoming dynamic at all hours, so that there's activity and a draw, not just during the work hours, but after hours, weekends, mornings, different times of day. And that includes programmed events. And programmed events need to be managed by someone or something. So that's kind of a tricky one in a commercial corridor that isn't otherwise organized. But design features are a more popular amenity, including art, fountains, and small gathering spaces, just designed to create more opportunities for people to connect with each other. So then we broke down our analysis to really focus on the corridor itself. We looked at how many properties were zoned in each of the zoning categories that are available or present on Port Washington Road. Looks like your B2 and B3 are the most popular zoning categories out there. Your institutional and public service district does include the senior living and healthcare, I believe. But that B2 and B3 zone are the most popular. We also looked at the primary land use description and how many businesses were included in each of those categories, and how much total square footage was also captured within those. And we have office is the most dominant or predominant category at 30. We had a law office. We talked about combining that into office. I see we didn't do that on this chart, but so there's almost 900,000 square feet of office space. We also have retail as the number 2 in the count, as well as the number of square feet, total square feet. And then medical office is also dominating. The other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of the office space includes offices that would be offering medical services. We didn't parse that out. We were looking at the signboards for a lot of the office buildings, and there might be an electrolysis person in there, or something that is more of a service, which could be a personal health care service. We didn't include that in medical office, but that was a very predominant category, the medical services. We looked at improved value per square foot and land value per acre, and those are different categories. Improved value per square foot just looks at the value of the development on the property. Land value per acre includes the value of the land in the category that includes the development. So that's why there are differences there. But your medical office, finance, restaurant and entertainment, retail are all at the top of the list as far as contributing significant value. But then we looked at the change in estimated fair market value, and we looked at this starting at 2010. We include that in we have those charts. I don't know if we included it in the report, but we did look at specifically just the value change between 2020. I don't mean to speed through this, but I'm definitely going to take questions. I just don't want to. There's a lot of data here to chew on. So, our next steps include identifying target business types. We've done some of this work already. Various new uses, redevelopment sites, recommending changes to zoning categories, And then we'll wrap up any unanswered questions and create our final report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee members? A lot to absorb. I learned one thing. Despite how we don't think we need any more banks, they do appear to provide the most value on a per square foot and per acre basis. So that was an interesting find.
They build nice buildings.
They build nice buildings and they pay taxes, yep. All good stuff. Any comments or questions from any of the other committee members?
I had one.
Sure, Alderman Bach.
It wasn't on this slide, but it was in the report. There was a slide about income, and there was something about where the incomes below, I think it was 150,000, were going down by 2029. Everything else was kind of going up, but I was curious on that group. So if you had two young people moving into the city or whatever, and they're just starting out, that seemed to be declining, and that was just interesting on your chart. And I didn't know if those numbers were all inflation adjusted. I assume they were.
I'm looking at an income chart on page 15. Is that what you're referring to?
I don't have it up right now, but I'm guessing that was. Does it have something like income group of 150,000 income going down 2029?
It's page 15.
Page 15.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see that last section there?
Mhm.
That just was, everything else is going up, but that group is going down.
Well, hopefully they're making more money.
Yeah, hopefully they're making more money, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just was, we're trying to attract other families in Mequon, and I'm just curious how that's maybe they're going up, but just curious.
Yeah, I hope that because the other categories are bumping up more significantly, the higher categories, I would want to assume that they were
Yeah.
maybe increasing their income in the next 4 years.
Right, and I would assume those are all inflation adjusted, so that group, I would think, would already be included in that $150,000 group, so you're assuming that group is gonna make more money with inflation adjusted, but that group is going down.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Good observation. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome back for part 2 of 3 of the corridor. Want to not repeat my comments from the previous meeting, assuming you remember them and you'll incorporate kind of everyone's comments for your final report. Things from hotels and this zoning code combinations, stuff like that. So don't want to get ahead of myself there. I think my main comment relates to senior housing, which is certainly a topic of interest for all of us. We've seen some great options proliferate along the corridor, and a couple of options. I think you're heading in the right direction in terms of, yeah, we probably do need more senior housing. I'd say affordable senior housing. I'm hearing it's not necessarily affordable for all seniors, and so I think a lot of our goal is for people who have families here to be able to age in place here in the community, not necessarily be the expensive option for everyone else to go flood into our community, because I don't know that we're looking for long-term growth in that way in terms of population. Not that it would be that long. I'm concerned about overlap with Uleo Creek. So we did, I guess, before you come to any final recommendations about, both two things, medical and senior housing, make sure you just double check our Uleo Creek, because I don't know, at least a quarter of that or half of that is senior housing and that. So we don't want to overreach with senior and end up with too much senior down the road. So that's my comment there. And I'm going to pause. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Barish. Anyone else? Everyone's waiting for the final report, aren't they? Okay, if there's any questions, we don't have to wait till the next meeting we can always funnel them through staff, and they'll get them in and addressed hopefully by the time we get a final report, and I think we'll get a draft We'll review it and then we'll make it final. Is that how it's going to work, or?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I just didn't make that up. I remembered that from one of our other meetings. That's good. Testing myself. All right. Thank you for the update. I'm excited to see the final product too. I think this much was good. I think I surprised myself a little bit by learning vacancies weren't as bad as I may have perceived them to, but that's actually a good thing. So we're not in dire straits. We're just getting ahead of the curve and trying to figure out where we want to be quicker, which is good. Thank you. Thanks for making the trip.
Welcome. My pleasure.
All right back on track. I hazard to say we're 4 minutes ahead of schedule. I'll probably regret saying that later. Our next topic is review and discussion of the revised town center neighborhood sign designs. So staff has been working through this, encountered some difficulty with DOT regulations for making signs breakaway when cars hit them. So we're back with some revised designs for our viewing pleasure. Thank you,
Right.
Kim. Go ahead.
Right. So unfortunately, our stone bases are not acceptable to WISDOT. We need to have a breakaway mechanism, obviously for safety, if there is a vehicle that runs into the median or into the curb line within the right of way. So we have to meet that standard. We have vetted this for several months with several different companies and engineers just to make sure that we didn't overlook any option that would allow us to still have that stone base. Time and time again, it really just came back that there's a mechanism that's approved by the Federal Highway Administration that is basically a turnkey approval, and really the only structural element that you can use to cover that is an aluminum cabinet. So we went down the path of figuring out how to replicate the sign, have some consistency with the Gateway Promenade, which we had all previously agreed to, and design these as breakaways. So just as a reminder, this map shows the Gateway Promenade at the intersection of Mequon and Cedarburg Road, and then the other locations for the sign. Basically includes 2 entryway signs, one near the Bunch Rock intersection, one east of the river, so between the river and Parkview in the medians, or that one's in the median. The one at Bunch Rock will actually be located near the Aurora location, just because there was competitiveness with the Foxtown Brewery and the Aurora development. There will be exit sign, so to speak, from the neighborhood that's on the corner of Bunch Rock along the street frontage of the public safety building. And then there are 2 horizontal signs that flank the interurban trail crossing. It's great location because it's mid-block. Just as a reminder, we pulled elements from the Gateway Promenade when the council reviewed these designs at the time of bidding the project. We talked about replication of those features. So these are the designs that are in your packet. One shows the aluminum cabinet painted black, and the not painted but fabricated as black, and the other is cream. This is kind of a iteration that has been discussed over the last several days, so I included it here in the PowerPoint. There are a lot of black features that have been implemented as part of the streetscaping, so we wanted to share that option. I did talk to the sign consultant, just a little concern over the ability to have the contrast with the logo. The logo's metal, it's patinaed. Both signs will have a halo glow behind it. The sign consultant's reaction between the two is that the darker color, the black, will definitely look cleaner and hide a lot of dirt, dust, and debris. It'll give you a cleaner look. Wasn't concerned about fading or maintenance over time to any greater degree than the cream color would be. And they indicated that there is a way to create that contrast, that they have not yet seen our patinaed logos, so they'd want to take a look at those, and there would probably just need to be some work done as we're installing them if we to address the illumination if we were to choose to go to the black. So these are the the smaller monument signs that are in the median. This is the taller ones over by Aurora and Parkview, and then these are the ones that are at the location of the OIT. I do have a little bit of concern, as I mentioned, about the aluminum cabinet. We did try to steer away from that. I do think there are examples, depending on its color, that it can look like a cheaper option. So that's why I did want to vet out the black color. I think that might give us a little bit more sophisticated look long term. And then I did just share with you some imagery of implementation in the neighborhood to kind of showcase how often we've used that black element. So really looking for your feedback on this final design, given those objectives, your preference on color. We can get these finalized and installed yet this year. There is dollars in the original, resolution to execute this. So there's significant funding for all of these signs, including the installation and electrical work.
Kim, did you consider gray? Like a dark gray? Or
Yes,
just
actually, one of the first images we got back from them was gray, but there wasn't really any other gray used throughout the neighborhood.
Alderman Strelchak.
Quick question. Why was the logo changed?
That was authorized at the time of the contract for this. We had a conversation about the gateway being a recognition of Mequon Thiensville, and then we created the split between the T and C so that we created the subtle difference as Mequon Town Center.
It's
So
the
that
same but different. So it's uniquely Mequon. It's Mequon's town center, but it's complementing the Mequon Thiensville logo on the corner. We discussed that at that meeting. It's a subtle, but
I was traveling.
you might have been out, yeah.
might have been what?
It's a subtle but
think I was
distinct
traveling for that
change that makes it ours,
No,
but
you can
complements the
like that.
shared branding at the corner.
I don't mean to pile on, but at that last meeting that you missed, I wasn't a huge fan of this either. But I do feel like it's a little late for us to opine on that. And I
No, it's not.
I feel bad for my fellow common council members who weren't even here for any of that. Now you see some of your faces, but I
It's
never liked the T in it for Thiensville.
The logos are produced and manufactured. The metal logos are already manufactured.
So. Okay.
We're commenting on the change in the sign, not the whole design again. Yes, we authorized this,
Yes.
I don't know, a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alderman Bratt wasn't here a year ago, so
Yeah.
you're off the hook.
I will say today's white is tomorrow's yellow. Like everything will show just like a 4-year-old kid's shirt. So I do like the darker color. What I do have a question on is as we think of gateways throughout Mequon, we're looking at the Port Road study. Is there a way we can keep this style consistency? So as we're thinking of other gateways, people will be consistent as people enter Cedarburg Road, Port Road, Tosa Road. If we're thinking of gateways at other places, can we sort of get the same sort of style? If we're just the M, if we're not inviting Thiensville to put their T on some of our areas.
So the Port Washington Road Streetscape Plan, which we'll talk about at another agenda item, and the council has approved the concept plan, does discuss signage for that corridor. And there has been some discussion, at least at the Economic Development Board level, about signage opportunities at gateway locations, including the Uleo Creek at Pioneer and at Highland. So there has been some discussion about carrying out some consistency in terms of elements, but the Mequon Town Center signage and all of the implementation of the features there, because we have very specific guidelines that were created, are really meant to identify that to create a sense of arrival and that you've landed, and that's true of any other location, right, of the Port Washington corridor as well, but that you've really landed in a unique location and it's meant to give a sense of arrival that's really distinct from anywhere else in the city. I mean, just the development itself, the pedestrian-oriented nature of it. So we are planning for other types of signage in some of these other projects, but it wouldn't be an exact replication of this.
Understood. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like the thought of where you're going with that, but then I'm not sure if we want to replicate the gateway feature on the corner of Mequon and Cedarburg everywhere in the city too. But I'm sure the logo would be naturally different because this is a logo just for this location. Though Port Washington would have something different, but you know, the vertical slats of wood, that's very much an element from the gateway feature. We're just trying to tie this area together, so I'm guessing it'll naturally be a little different, but
yeah, and I know, you know, we have some new members, and even those of us who have been here a while probably forget all of the phases that we went through of decision making, but there were themes that the council had weighed in on for Town Center. If some of you may recall, Mequon River Station was the one of the three that was chosen. So there were a whole set of palettes of colors and materials that kind of matched this river station theme that we have then used and executed throughout not only the private development, but other little subtle details in the neighborhood. Those features aren't going to necessarily have the same storytelling or identification in other parts of the city.
Alderman Strelchak.
Since I'm not voting on the logo part of it, I'm going to comment that I like the black better than the white. I tend to agree. The rendering has zero contrast. It looks terrible. You're going to need some level of actual, you know, hey, show me the material against a sign background, maybe hold it in the yard, have them, you know, take an exercise and come out and show you that there's going to be enough contrast that you're not going to put up a monotone blob of signage for the amount of money that we're spending on these. So I agree with you. I think the black element ties in. I would have liked to have seen maybe a gray, but working with color for 20 years, like if you look at grays and khakis together, they're two different colors, but they're still of the same hue tone. So when you're driving down the road and you're looking at a sign, the contrast isn't enough that you can tell that that's exactly what it is. So that's my word of caution with the black. Visually, it is cool. Visually, it ties in with the design trends of, you know, the current time and day. And I think the white would have an opportunity to get a little bit stark. You know, white or ivory would have a tendency to get stark. I like the vertical features of the slats on there. I think that's just great as how that ties in with the current feature. And, you know, you did a really nice job. I would be objecting to the logo being tied through on the whole thing. I think from a sign, just philosophically, because I wasn't speaking at that last meeting, philosophically, from a sign tracking standpoint and a logo brand recognition, you're spot on with exactly how you did it and how you approached it. It should have probably been the same, although the dividing feature is really identifying Mequon as Mequon. So the reason for having the split in between the M and the T there, you know, to identify the Mequon Town Center, but have that same logo feel is good. I'm going to caution you, though, that this is the last section that unless there's a comprehensive plan and Thiensville's buying in on design similarities as it goes through their community, that I really want to kind of function and really kind of brand Mequon Thiensville throughout the Mequon, you know, real estate. Our taxpayers are paying to brand Thiensville, and they're a great community, and we love them. They're part of us, right? But you know, we should really just fund our own project and, you know, be front and center and visible as we are.
I think I saw Alderman Hanchard's hand up. It's not
Yeah, my
signed.
only comment was that I like the black, but I want the contrast with the logo.
Yeah.
That's the only thing, because if I look at it right now, if I'm driving, I really don't, it doesn't stand out. It doesn't, so I would want a contrast. That's it.
So I have
It's reading a little darker on the screen than on ours, but that was my initial comment when I got them as well. Definitely a concern that we have to address.
So I had a question. Are the halo lights on all day?
That was one of the conversations that we had after we saw the black. That can definitely be the case, but we're going to
It's
explore.
LEDs. They cost almost nothing to run.
Yeah,
So
we
yeah.
can explore all options.
So I'd be interested in seeing it before we mass produce it. How do they treat the cabinet? How is it? I mean, aluminum's shiny. It's it's a silverish metal. How do they? Is it painted? Is it anodized? Do we know?
I don't know.
Because they can.
We can definitely.
Anodization
Obviously
lasts
we have some
forever.
choice between the sheen of it. I mean, we can get a couple samples and make sure we vet those.
And they can
anyone
also
interested
anodize
is
in
welcome
any
to come see
color
them.
under the sun. It's
Right.
and it's just a layer of aluminum oxide with a dye in it, and it lasts forever. But yeah, the white will end up looking. We do a great job of showing just how much our plows do in the wintertime.
One of our new utility boxes, several of them are painted black as well. So you may have noticed them, you may have not noticed them, but we can definitely take some cues from those and see what we like about the shine of those or the matteness of
And
those.
if it really need to, I don't know if you can just paint it, a gray behind it just to create a little contrast, but not paint the whole thing gray. I don't know how that would look, but
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would look in the daytime. Yeah.
well, it'd definitely make the
And there's
contrast
definitely
better.
shadows to it, right? Because it's it's set off
Mm-hmm.
from the actual cabinet. So
It's a really hard thing to view in 2D.
he did not,
sure.
go into a lot of detail with me. He just said that was something that they, one, they'd want to see the metal logo because they haven't seen it firsthand yet, and then obviously being able to continue to do adjustments out in the field.
I like Alderman Strelchuk's idea. We could just make a sample,
Yeah.
cheap piece of aluminum, paint it, throw it on there,
Throw it
and
behind
then look
the
at pictures of something real rather than a computer rendering. It's too hard. I mean, light is too tricky.
Call me. There's free coffee in it for you.
Okay.
Is there consensus on the black if we can get the contrast? Okay. Everyone's kind of nodding head up and down. Okay. Is that you have everything you need?
That's all I need. Thank you so much.
All right. Fourth and final item. And now we're 4 minutes behind, but that's okay. We started 10 minutes late, so we're still making up time. Discussion regarding the brush site automation project. And community development has passed the baton to Public Works. It was my only Olympics reference, I swear.
Good evening. Sorry, thank you for your patience. As we brought it up here, I will talk really fast so that we can otherwise make up for our time here. We're here to discuss the brush site automation. It has been identified by Public Works for a significant amount of time and then was otherwise included in the strategic planning discussion. You may otherwise be aware of the existing site out on Bonnewell. What you may not otherwise be aware of is that it's built on a former landfill. So that is what is added to some of the complication of how we proceed here. We're looking for both feedback on some policy related items so that when the brush site is ready to open, we can bring forward some language more formally about how we would operate the site in its new condition, and also looking for some guidance on the finalization of the design so that we can get the project bid. The first discussion is regarding the season dates and hours of operations. One of the reasons why we are interested in otherwise putting in a automated gate is to allow for more opportunities for residents to bring in their brush. We are proposing at this time both an extension of the season to start in March and run through the second Saturday in December, and also an expansion of the days of the week and at times the hours under which we operate. We are requesting that we can stay closed on Monday for site management. We're expecting after the weekend that there would be a large amount of brush that we need to move out of the way and otherwise get ready for vehicles to be able to access the rest of the week. So not looking for a commitment, just looking to maybe take the temperature on this expansion of the season, days of the week, and hours before I move on. And if no one has an opinion, I can just go to the next one. I just, before we bring it forward, just wanted if anyone objected to. All right, well, then I will not stay on it. We will continue to go through. We did originally request consideration of a storage building. That was not a part of the scope for the automated gate when it was otherwise visioned, but as we went through what the impact would be to our operation itself, we were comparing what we do at the existing brush site when it's only open for the 2 days a week that it is, and then the consideration of the expansion to 6 days a week, which includes the additional time to get the loader as well as employees back and forth to be able to again clean and move material on the site. While we're asking to be closed on Monday, we do anticipate being up there potentially every day of the week, but for the sake of conversation, we used an estimate of 4 times a week just to compare what the impact was both to the hours of what we spend at the current brush site versus what we're proposing. I will note that we currently have a part-time brush site attendant that would not be otherwise required when we transition to the automated gate. So there is an increase to the number of hours that we would spend getting the loader back and forth to the site, additional fuel and tires that led to our original proposal for a building. When we compare that to the cost of the site for no building or with building, the life cycle cost would take a significant amount of time to otherwise make up for the increase in cost. From our perspective, there's still the convenience of being able to have a building where not only we could put the equipment for the automated gate itself, but also store the loader we were talking about, reducing our staff time to get back and forth and hide the porta potty for anyone that is otherwise offended when they visit the site at seeing it out there. We do have a kind of 30,000 foot view comparison of a building versus no building that we've put on the screen, as well as the comparison of an asphalt parking lot versus a concrete parking lot. For those of you that have not heard me otherwise go through a life cycle analysis about asphalt versus concrete, I'm happy to otherwise do so. The concrete does pose a little bit more of a complication because of some of the environmental factors and the depth that would otherwise have to be dug to put in the concrete parking lot. So this is where we are looking for some feedback on what to include in the design if there is direction not to include the building with the bid that would come through. What we would like to ask for is consideration of still doing the environmental work so that if a building was ever put there in the future, that would already be completed.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I see Alderman Gebhardt.
Great. Hi, Kristen. Thank you for that. Quick question on that loader. Is that loader dedicated just to the brush site?
No.
So if you kept it out there, you would end up having to move it anyways to other sites then?
Yes, we Obviously, we've never done this before, so we're trying to anticipate how we would manage our operations. You may recall a couple years ago we requested permission to purchase a loader that was initially being used for cleaning up the snow in all of the cul-de-sacs. There's no question we also use it during the summer. It doesn't sit the rest of the time, but we would have times where we would use our other loader that we have and leave the second loader out at this site that is primarily used in snow operations. But yes, we have other operations where there may be times where there is no loader stored, but that would be how we would attempt anyway to manage the equipment if there was a building on site.
I'll throw in a little tidbit of info we talked about this morning. I know everyone's probably got the ARPA dollar value stuck in their head. There was about a $250,000 wedge stuck in there for the automated gate. The parking lot would be out of the road program, because we do parking lots and roads out of the same fund. So if you're doing the mental math and thinking ARPA is going to run out of money, that's where the other piece of the puzzle is. So.
And you would be.
We'd want to do them both at the same time, because you got all the workers out there, and just get it done at the same time.
And because it wasn't considered at that time, there was not an identified source for the building. So that would either have to be an additional capital funding or a part of the borrowing. But that's why before we bid it, that's why we're looking for direction from the committee on what should be included in the bid as we move forward.
Alderman Bach.
Are there any other similar municipalities that have this? Do they typically
yes.
have this?
We
Did you look around and check and see what do they have these kind of sheds or storage places for?
I feel like we've toured everyone in the greater Ozaki and some into Milwaukee area. Many of them are different. Some of them are at their DPW site, so they don't need any equipment storage because they store all of their equipment in their DPW facility. There are some that do have buildings there. Some use smaller equipment because they're smaller municipalities, so they may not need a loader. They may need a skid steer instead. So it does vary.
Any other comments or questions on the items? Alderman Strelchak.
$780 for a building, that's pretty expensive. So what is that all going to accomplish, and how big are you anticipating, and what does that all include?
I will note that the building under direction by community development was originally conceptualized to be similar to the Mequon maintenance building that we approved, 2 years ago or so. Perhaps it could be some consideration for a lower architectural standard that could reduce the building cost. But it is essentially the building that would house the loader, the porta potty, because we wouldn't be able to put in a septic or holding tank or anything. So house the porta potty and then the equipment or little office area associated with the automated gate.
I'd be more on par with a building that would meet agricultural, because it's similar to what the agricultural uses are in the areas. So just in general, I'd be fine with you driving back and forth. I mean, the wear and tear on the tires is, it's staff hours and it's time, and it's not the best use of time to be driving back and forth a couple times a week, but it's still, you got a lot of hours to make up for $750,000 and, building maintenance and ongoing, expense and insurance and light and electric and things like that. So I'd be more inclined to say no building, personally, but that's where I'm at.
Could you make that a straw poll vote?
Yeah, we're
It's the
going to get
mayor's
to
job.
that. Yeah,
So
yeah,
that I
we're going to get to that very soon.
Okay.
Trying to see if anyone else wants to chime in with comments.
Where would the money come from for this? How would this have to be a new budget item?
If it was a building, yeah, well, the building becomes a go find the source of funds exercise.
And how does that fit into the city's priorities with other things too?
Yeah, we're not super equipped to make that comparison tonight. I guess getting back to staff's recommendations, there's the recommendation on the table is there's two recommendations. You can build it with the building or without the building, but if you include the environmental remediation portion for the portion where we'd put a building, it's shovel ready if we ever wanted to put a building there in the future. And then, if a year from now we come back and Rob wants a barn for the building and it looks agricultural and it's half the cost, maybe that's more palatable then. But doing the work all at the same time would be setting us up for that decision down the road. I agree. That's $700,000-800,000, but weren't exactly anticipating to spend is kind of hard to squeeze in. So yeah, it's a good question, but it's hard to answer because we're doing all the other public safety facilities things and talking about pools and other things that are much bigger dollar values.
Well, I like your idea of building it so that in the future, if you could put some kind of structure there, that probably is going to be needed at some point, I would think. But
my sense is that if we did this all now, it would be cheaper than going back and doing a separate remediation later, because everything, it's just doing a little more area.
And we always run the risk that regulations change. So this is what we know based on the conversations with the DNR at this time of what we would have to do now if we move forward. But if we don't, those regulations or staff could change and it could be something different.
Alderman Bratt.
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Bach. I think if we plan now to get it ready for a site, we hold ourselves harmless on any future changes. Do you know how many square feet the building would be that we're thinking at?
I don't remember what was used. Does 60 by 40 we're going with.
Okay, that's pretty, okay. But I would advocate we keep it in at least the foot.
I'm sorry?
I would advocate that we just keep the prep in for the site.
Alderman Parrish.
I question that cost, but I'm not sure that I'm in favor either way of a building. I'm okay with doing the environmental impact so we can plan ahead. And I don't know if I read that in the packet or if I made it up in my head, but wasn't there an argument where some sort of covering, or there's going to be like an awning over the building for covering the equipment and things that people drop off? So, to keep it covered, and then that leads me, if we're not going to do a building, is there any valuable to like almost a lean-to structure, and then you avoid all like the methane exhaust concerns?
I'm not
and all
even
that.
looking behind me. Are they shooting daggers?
So, I don't want to spend money, but is that a better alternative?
We don't like to do as I say is not as I do, which is why we consulted with community development. But on the surface, I'm assuming a lean-to is not preferable, they say.
Well, yeah, we don't want to be entirely hypocritical. I gave Kim a little grief about this the other day. We have approved at least one agricultural heavy-duty hoop house style structure. You see them all over rural Wisconsin. They just a dome structure. It's got a metal skeleton and a high-quality covering over the top. Those can be had for several tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands. But we could always. I'm guessing the environmental portion would be the same no matter what.
If it's enclosed, that's the trigger because we have to otherwise prepare for methane mitigation and things. So it's it being closed that drives some of that expense.
Yeah. I'm not sure about those types of structures, but they're mostly enclosed. They would probably trigger it. I would guess. Administrator Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Just trying to follow the bouncing ball here. And Director Lundin, if you wouldn't mind clarifying, if we do the environmental remediation for the building in advance, that is the higher of the two numbers included in the packet this evening?
Correct.
The
That's
160?
on that first line. That's the 164,950.
And we are seeking direction or input from the council tonight on what we would like to see from a design standpoint, so that as we design and put together the documents and put them out for bid, our intent is to come back for a contract award before the end of the year.
Correct.
And as I read it in the packet, we were going to bid out both options. So if we were to go forward with the environmental remediation for the building option and maybe not have consensus here to pursue the building option, are we still in a position to bid it out on a dual track and see what prices come back and allow this body to make a decision on building or no building at a future meeting?
We could. The rest of the design costs will be more for the building because obviously we would be designing a building or we would not be designing a building. Now that was contemplated as a part of the original contract to design the building, but that would be the difference. We've done that to do dual tracks. Unfortunately, our last attempt at that didn't result in favorable bidding because the primary contractor under just a parking lot and automated gate project is likely going to be the paving company versus if you have an alternate for a building, you're going to get a mix of prime contractors. Some of them are going to be the building contractor with a paving sub or a paving that has to get a building sub. So that could drive some of those costs up.
So if we're feeling a little bit of sticker shock here on the dais tonight, and we've got other looming large scale capital projects that we're going to be discussing and considering over the next 6 to 8 weeks as we go through budget, it really behooves the council to give staff the direction, building or no building here tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Alderman Meyer.
Just quickly, so we had some residents requesting that the dump stays, or the brush site stays open a little bit longer. And the simple solution on that was hiring one more person for another day and we could keep it open a little bit longer. It's gone up to the top of the number now. It's like $2.1 million to do some stuff. And I've been on board with going along the way with having the automatic with the card, getting inside and doing that type of stuff. I'm also now in favor of making sure that we do this the least expensive way that's possible for it to be done. So, you know, I'm just to let you know, I'm in favor of not doing the remediation now and not doing the building, but getting it going forward so we can get the brush site started up for the residents. There's other stuff along the way too, the operations of that. I mean, I've had the fortune of being able to go over there a number of times the last few weeks or last couple of months collecting mulch that's from over there, which is free by anybody that wants to go over there and pick it up. So it's some nice stuff in that. But the operation of it, not the person that's there, but the people that are using it are not using it properly. So I think that there's a lot of spent time over there by our city staff because having to correct some of the stuff that's over there with people putting stuff in the wrong piles and doing stuff of that nature for it. And it's something that, and we don't address that tonight, but it's something in the future we have to.
It is the next slide. We're going to talk about some of those rules and things that we want to put in place after we get through what the design will include.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, there's three options. I think three main options. There's gate, parking lot, and no remediation for future building. There's gate and parking lot with plans for a future building with the remediation, which is a little bit more, and then there's the whole thing with the building. So is this a question or a? Okay.
Point of order. So if we choose that quasi option where no building but with environmental planning, are you saying that we're choosing another $140,000?
So I think it's the delta between those two.
Okay, thank you.
It's expensive to dig up old trash and incinerate it and cap it properly.
The environmental option allows you what?
That allows you to put a building there in the future without having to redo it again later. Yeah. So does everyone understand what the low, medium, and high options are? If so, we'll just call them the low, medium, and high options. So who's in favor of the low option? Okay, there's 4. That's probably a winner. Medium? Oh, it's another 4. Wow, it's a tie. Okay.
Come on, high option.
High option, well, yeah. The high option is getting 0 votes, I can predict.
Okay.
I feel like we're gonna get a building there someday. Probably not now. Maybe an agricultural looking building. I just think we probably have some ARPA dollars that are not gonna be swept up, perhaps. I think it's wise to plan for the future. I just think we're gonna end up with a building here someday, to be honest. Alderman Strelchak.
Can we ask the question on the asphalt versus concrete, because that's another deciding point in both options?
Sure, who wants asphalt?
Who is
Any takers for concrete?
Oh.
Wow,
I thought
there's
that's
a couple.
Kristen, what's the deal with the concrete again? What you
The
like?
life cycle?
Yeah, you like the concrete better than the asphalt.
Yeah, I mean, the grinder and the equipment that we otherwise operate on it put a significant load on the pavement, and so having concrete will make it last, I don't want to say forever, but at least until I retire. So I'll say forever and stake my claim on that, but it,
Well,
for what it is, would certainly last for a long time. The turning movements, the kind of abuse that parking lot gets, of all of our parking lots, it's probably the best case for a concrete lot, which is why we asked for the kind of alternate analysis there.
so here's a question. Does it all need to be concrete? Or only where we have ingress and egress with the loader? I don't imagine we're using the whole parking lot, but because that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, because I don't want to build it and tear it up
Right.
in 5 years and have it be.
And then we
brought it up
voted on
again.
it before Kristen gave her description, so we maybe want to call the question.
No,
a
I'm glad
second
you
time.
asked the question.
Yeah,
Or is it
I'd
impossible
have
to tell?
look. We hadn't. I'm not sure we had gotten to the point that we've kind of configured the site. Obviously, some of this was dependent on that, whether we were going to have a building and things like that. So I'd have to look a little closer and think more about if there's a scenario that makes sense of where the line would be between.
So these are, let me ask the question a different way that maybe allows us to come off this. These are staff estimates at this point.
Yes,
We haven't bid it. That could be the only option in the bid,
correct. You could
is
bid
concrete
it with
versus,
a,
maybe we should carry that much
could bid
forward.
asphalt with a concrete alternate.
Yeah, let's do that and bring back those numbers, because I think that's an excellent point brought up by Alderman Strelchuk, and I think
And
it'd be helpful if we had the data, and it gives us more time to react.
And I meant to speak to Alderman Meyer's point. The parking lot has been in the capital plan for years, even if the automated gate was not going to happen. That parking lot was the next to otherwise be done. So that would have been contemplated even if there was no automatic gate considered out there.
Alderman Meyer.
You know, I'm really not in favor of the concrete. So we're using asphalt there currently, right?
It's basically gravel, but at one point it was asphalt.
There's asphalt, I think, in some of the areas, because when I was down there scraping, I could see it. But whatever. There are 3 piles right now that are there, and then if you're going to go with asphalt, you're going to go with concrete, I think you'd have to do the whole thing, because they do the lifting and stacking on all those piles. If it's going to be kind of configured the same way it is, so you're going to be kind of articulating around all those piles instead of it just being
Yeah,
in
it
and
will
out.
be different. The other sites that we viewed at have kind of what they call bins, kind of some more defined cinder block differentiation of where the different materials go. So we're hoping the result will be better organization, but I do somewhat agree. I'm trying to think in my head. I'm not sure there's a hybrid option that necessarily makes sense, but the bidding the concrete as an alternative is certainly an option and a way to compare the two costs.
Yeah, the more we talked about, I forgot,
Yes.
the loader's going to be driving on that surface a lot. It'll certainly last longer if it's concrete, but
And I
guess
don't
we'll
know
have
if
to
any of you have
assess.
seen the grinder that we bring in
Yeah.
twice a year, but that is a monster piece of equipment as well. So
yeah. Everyone in favor of getting a cost on both when we bid it? Okay.
okay,
Do you have sufficient direction?
I think so.
Okay. Excellent. And it'll come back and we'll have to approve a bid anyway, so.
And oh yeah. Okay. Sure. We're just confirming that those were estimates. So
Okay.
obviously, when we move forward, we will better understand actual costs. I know we're running low on time, so I will put this up here and maybe just ask, because we will have time, if people want to give us feedback. But the concept is that we would charge an increased permit fee because we are offering more days of the week than we currently are now. And to avoid what the current concern is with actually the majority of the use at the site being by contractors on behalf of residents and not residents themselves. Right now we have a human being that can otherwise confirm that that contractor is there on behalf of a resident and not that it's just a contractor that's using our brush site. So our proposal is to set the initial permit fee based on a number of uses that's based on our residential number of uses, and that after that there would be an additional permit fee. And that way we don't have to try to find a way to administer a brush card that's used by a contractor on behalf of residents, and if it gets used more than what we anticipate would be that base resident, then there would be an additional fee, which is what would theoretically offset the cost for the additional material. We'll have a license plate reader. We'll talk another time maybe about the penalties of either people dumping things that aren't allowed there, like mattresses or things that they thought they could get away with, and or penalties for misuse of their card and things. So if anybody has any feedback, you can email me, but otherwise we'll bring that forward at a future meeting.
I'll ask one little last question, and unless there's any feedback on this, does this seem reasonable? Everyone kind of, no one's objecting, so.
Okay,
yeah.
good, thank you.
There's been a couple of things we've talked about over time. One was potential private contractor e-waste recycling bin.
Yes.
And then the
Yes,
poor
the
clothing
clothes.
guy we kicked out of all the gas stations.
Yes.
There's
Well-
space envisioned for such things. It can't add to this infinitely, but
Yes, we do anticipate that. We are still trying to figure out how to do that with which side of the gate and things like
Sure.
that. But yes, we are
Okay.
still including, they just emailed me this week. So those e-recycling people are all ready. So yes.
I'm
it
ready
is-
because I always can't make the weekend the county does it, and I've got stuff piling up in my garage. So awesome! I think it'd be a real benefit for residents to be able to get rid of some of that stuff the proper way too.
Yes.
Any more discussion on this topic from anyone? Any last parting comments? If there are none, we are at the end of the committee of the whole meeting. We just have our planning calendar. Anyone want to talk about that? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn, and then we'll have a short 3 or 4 minute recess before we start the common council meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. almost all back. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the short pause. We'll get back at it here and call the Common Council meeting of Wednesday, August 14th to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk, to make sure we all returned.
Alderman Strelchek? Alderman Talaco? Alderman Meyer? Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Bach?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Bratt?
You.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
Mayor Nurbin?
Here. First up, we have a public hearing, Ordinance 2024-1664, an ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code related to specific development standards for distilleries. This was recommended by the Planning Commission on June 24th. Further recommendation coming from the Public Welfare Committee tonight, August 14th. What did the committee decide? Oh, I'm just going to get all the committee stuff out there, and then I'll call the question for the...
Public Welfare took this up this evening and approved it unanimously.
Fantastic, thank you. And the first reading was last month at the Common Council meeting on June 9th. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, we're now in public hearing. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to speak on this topic? Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are back in regular session. And we'll now consider this ordinance that's before us. Any questions from anyone on the council?
Move approval.
Motion and a second. Hearing and seeing no comments, please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchek?
Aye.
Alderman Talaco?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Bach?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
Aye.
Alderman Bratt?
Aye.
And Alderman Gebhardt?
Aye.
That ordinance is adopted. Next up, we have personal appearances and public comment. Citizens wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time. If you desire to be heard on an agenda item, you may be heard when that item is considered on the agenda. Please speak into the microphone at the podium. Time limit is 5 minutes. We do have one person who signed up this evening. Nancy Martin from 1221 Pippin Court wishes to speak. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I am here. I'm a election official, and I want to thank Carolyn and her staff for an excellent job of taking care of us. And then additionally, I would like to be like Oliver and say thank you, sir, and may I have more. The council provides a stipend that as the precinct chief, I get a stipend to buy lunches for our staff. As you probably know, it's a very long day. Most of my people were there for most of the time. I got there at 6:15, and then we left about 10:30, and that's a.m. to p.m. So it makes for a very long day. It makes it easier for us if the staff does not have to leave the facility, and if we have some lunch to provide for them, it makes the day go smoother and allows us to have full-time people as opposed to half-day people. You have graciously, in the past couple of years, provided us a $100 stipend per election, and particularly as we go into the November election when we're expecting hopefully a couple more staff positions. If we could have a little bit more money, it would help me be able to provide for my staff a little bit better. So I would ask if you have any questions or comments. So.
Thank you. As it's not on the agenda, we don't typically respond. We take
Gotcha.
all input. I'll talk more with
And
our
I'll
clerk
be happy
and
to answer any questions, and I'm sure Carolyn can give you a perspective for all of the chiefs. So thank you very
Sounds
much.
good. Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening that wishes to speak on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Public officials reports. I only have one thing to share, and it's our favorite time of year here in Mequon. I'd like to invite anyone who's watching, and if you feel free to invite your family and friends to join us here on Saturday, September 7th, out in the steps of City Hall and up and down Cedarburg Road, where we'll have the annual Taste of Mequon celebration. There's always great food, good music, and fellowship and community building, so hope to see you there. And that's my only announcement. Administrator Jones.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Two very, very quick updates. As you may have read in our weekly bulletin last Friday, and courtesy of our friends at WISDOT, Mequon Road, next to the I-43 interstate, which is currently closed down, will be reopening to through traffic between Port Road and Lakeshore Drive this coming Friday. So that's been a little bit of a bottleneck in the Port Washington Road corridor area. And again, that'll be open to traffic coming up later this week. And then it's not very often that I get to preempt the mayor, but the Jewish Food Festival is coming up this coming weekend at Rotary Park, August 18th and 19th. The hours are noon to 7 p.m., and there will be lots of food, lots of activities, and lots of music taking place both days at the park. So before you hit the taste of Mequon, come out to the Jewish Food Festival. Thank you.
Excellent. I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. It is on my calendar, but as my cell phone was run over by a car recently, I can no longer access my personal calendar. So, moving on to the consent agenda, we have 11 sets of meeting minutes from various boards and commissions, and one ordinance. Is there a motion on the 11 sets of meeting minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the consent agenda is approved. We do have one ordinance first reading. Ordinance 2024-1667, an ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code relating to WDNR MS4 stormwater permit conditions. This was recommended by the Planning Commission July 22nd. Further recommendation forthcoming by Public Works this evening. And Public Works decided.
We approved it.
Public Works recommended it as well, and it is a first reading, and we'll take it up formally next month. Next, we have just one ordinance, one other ordinance for consideration. Ordinance 2024-1665, an ordinance creating Section 2-183 Prin 1 of Mequon Municipal Code relating to informed consent concerning certain actions of the city's legal counsel, recommended by Public or Finance and Personnel Committee on July 9th, and first reading last month at Common Council also on July 9th. Is there a motion to approve or any questions?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any last minute comments or questions? We didn't get out air last month. Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Tlaco. Alderman Meyer. Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Bach.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Bratt.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
And Alderman Stralchek.
And that ordinance is adopted. Moving on to resolutions. Resolution 4133, a resolution adopting proposed updates to the city's financial policies. This was recommended earlier this evening by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
I'd move approval.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions from anyone on the council? I'll give a preview of coming attractions at the Appropriations Committee meeting in a couple of weeks, where we're going to do a budget preview. There'll be a short discussion on fund balances and percentages. What's before us tonight leaves the policy we have alone at 10 to 12%, but we're going to get a little more info and have a little more debate on just that singular item relating to these policies at the Appropriations Committee meeting. So just so you know what's coming at you. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And those changes are adopted. Resolution 4135, a resolution approving master services agreement for implementation of a new agenda management system with Civic Select of Manhattan, Kansas, in the initial amount of $34,582 during fiscal year 2025. This was also recommended earlier this evening by Finance and Personnel Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions from anyone who didn't get to enjoy this topic at Finance and Personnel Committee, or even if you were there? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak,
Aye.
Alderman Telako.
And that resolution is also adopted. Our final resolution, Resolution 4136, a resolution authorizing a contract amendment for development of streetscape construction plans on Port Washington Road between Zedler Lane and Mequon Road with Carwood Engineering Consultants Limited of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount not to exceed of $88,200. There's a recommendation forthcoming from Public Works.
Public Works approve of the 3-0, and I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? Alderman Parrish.
Thank you. I can't remember. Do we actually have, I feel like we gave feedback to the consultant last time, a few months ago, and they were going to come back with revised drawings. So are we approving, because we gave a bunch of feedback on, do we have a final drawing, I guess is my point? We have a final set of what we've all agreed on, and
I think we have the input, but not the final drawings.
so and then we're going ahead tonight and approving construction drawings, but we're still waiting on the other drawings, right?
The council weighed in on modifications to the plans, but I don't recall that it needed to come back for approval. I thought we got the approval of the concept plan. This is the development of the of converting
Yep.
the concept plan to the construction plan.
Approval of the plan with comments
Yeah.
made at the meeting, which you rolled in. Okay, would we,
I just can't say that I really, if someone asked me like to summarize what we approved, I don't know that I could at this moment. So, but I get that you want to get the construction docs moving. So maybe offline, if you could share the most current version, and if we see anything, we'll let you know.
We could provide a executive summary of the project and the final concept plan, and send it out to all the council members.
Yeah,
and
just
have
the
a
most
link.
recent version.
The link on the website. Yep.
perfect. And if we approve this tonight, I won't get to signing it for a few days, so pay attention to that coming out soon, and then my guess is the earliest I'll be back to sign anything will be Friday. So it gives you a couple days to review. But let's try and get that to everyone tomorrow sometime. Perfect. Any other comments or questions on this item? Going once, going twice. Seeing no more, please call the roll.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak,
Aye.
Alderman Telako, and Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
That resolution is also adopted. We have no unspecified or specified unfinished business from prior meetings. The only item under specified new business is an aldermanic appointment to the Ethics Board from District 7. Laura Graup? Did I say it right? Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That appointment stands. We need just one final motion this evening.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.